Good morning, everybody. My name is Benay. I'm the Chief Information Officer of Canada here in London with the Apolitical gang this morning, and they asked me to talk about leadership for about 10 minutes. Which I guess is going to be a really hard thing to do because it's 10 minutes. So a little bit of context, we all know the world is changing super quickly. If you believe the hype, we're in the middle of a fourth industrial revolution. We're talking about things like warp drives being tested out of NASA for you Star Trek fans. We've teleported atoms. We're talking about lifespans of 120 years and IQs of 1,000 thanks to implants. And then we have sort of how government operates within that context. And typically how government's operated, and since we're both Westminster systems, it can be quite slow and daunting. And when you're in a country like Canada that has federal, provincial, and municipal level government, it makes things very federated, which is wonderful, democracy, but it's also very challenging to navigate and do quick turns in the context of everything that's going on in the world around us, whether that's privacy, whether that's artificial intelligence. So leadership in that context becomes very different than the leadership pre-Fourth Industrial Revolution. So I'm going to talk about four quick things. I'm going to talk about letting it go. I'm going to talk about Hippos, I'm going to talk about Nike, and I'm going to give you a donkey story at the end of this, and then we're going to try to wrap all of that up in the next 8 minutes on leadership. So let's start with letting it go. If you are a public sector leader, I implore you, first of all, to let go of everything you've ever learned around public sector governance, not because it's all wrong, but because it's actually not a bad starting premise. Assume that because of the last 5 to 10 years and the pace of change that's going on around the world around us, that everything you've been taught is wrong. And that's not to say, again, I will repeat that everything you do or everything you've thought have learned is wrong. It's mostly around the fact that everything you've learned yesterday is no longer applicable today because things are changing so quickly. So learn to let it go. Okay, let go of everything you've been told, let go of the box, the structure that government has imposed on people, and think very, very differently, because that's how every other sector is thinking. I guarantee you that the folks at the Hilton hotels did not think that 3 people in their basement would create Airbnb, which would disrupt their entire industry. And we seem to think that public sector and government has a grip on citizens and has a monopoly on citizens. So let's not be the next sort of platform economy victim, and think about the problem set very, very differently. So yourself as a leader, whether you're a permanent secretary, deputy minister, or a manager, or even an individual contributor, you have to let go of the box and the structure that's been imposed on you in the last 150 years, because the world is very different. Okay, so that's the first thing, let it go. So I guess I'm ripping off Walt Disney and Elsa and the song Let It Go to make your morning wonderful and have this super annoying song in your head. So the second thing is Hippos, the highest paid person's opinion in the room. If you are a leader, you must learn to not be that. We still often associate knowledge, experience with hierarchy in the public sector, whereas in the private sector or anywhere else in the world, it's the developers that are leading the world. Now, the trick is finding the right balance, because a developer that doesn't really care about policy or social inclusion or privacy or other things can be very, very dangerous in today's day and age. So we have to find the right balance, but the automatic assumption that you are the highest paid person's opinion in the room because of public sector hierarchy means that you'll probably address the problem set the wrong way. So we have to find a way to get more people around the table from tech in policy discussions. We have to find a way to get more policy people in tech discussions. There's multidisciplinarity of any single issue is you're now got 10 people around the table, as opposed to historically you would have had 1 or 2. So do not be a hippo. Do not be the highest paid person in the room. The highest paid person's opinion in the room that cannot dictate sort of the solution to a problem in today's day and age in the public sector context. Thirdly, the Nike part that I talked about. So we need to get to a place where we stop seeing policy as the sacred sort of cow in every single organization, because the importance of doing is overtaking the importance of that we had talks and this 2 years to develop the right policy and the impacts on citizen. I could get 3 programmers in a basement and completely turn over an entire industry in a matter of 6 months. Think of Uber, for example. So as the public sector is talking about this, Uber for 2 to 3 years worldwide has been disrupting the transportation sector. And while it took governments, both municipal, regional, or national, a significant amount of time to kind of wrap their heads around the policy problem, someone went out and did it to them. right? So we have to get away from the policy lens being sort of the sacred cow of public sector and actually start valuing doing things more than policy. And I'm not saying the policy people don't do things. Please don't misquote me. I'm simply saying that if you are a policy person, you need to consider the pace of change that we've just talked about, and often that will happen in the technology space. So that will require something very different from our public service. It will require the courage to act faster without always having all the data and trying to stay ahead of things. Facebook, Cambridge Analytica, as an example. How do you react to that? And how do you react not in 5 years, but in fact in 5 weeks? So it is a very different space for our policymakers. Again, we'll get back to the point of multidisciplinarity. If you are a leader, you need to bring all of these perspectives to your table immediately. Not wait, not do things in a linear fashion, but crash these opinions and these things together. And we have to get to a point where the doing actually influences the policy cycle a heck of a lot quicker in light of everything else going around us. Because if we do not do that, things will happen to us, things we don't want to have happen to us or to our citizens. So it's very imperative that we get into sort of a just do it mode, and as opposed to a linear sort of discussion, traditional policy lens. Lastly, a story. I promised you a donkey story. So this is a story of a young man and his grandfather walking to the village with their donkey. The old man, the grandfather, is in his 90s, very frail, so rides the donkey as the boy walks beside him and walks towards the village to go to the market. As they're walking to the village, they pass people and these people start commenting on how it's horrible that the old man is making the young boy walk beside him as he's riding the donkey. So the old man hears this, decides to get off the donkey, put the young boy on the donkey, and they start walking towards the village. As they continue walking towards the village, they pass another group that starts to talk away and say how horrible it is for this young boy to be making this old man walk beside him as the young boy is riding the donkey. So the young boy and the old man hear this, they decide to both ride the donkey together. That way they should be okay. They pass a third group of people on their way to the village who says how horrible it is for two people to be riding a donkey and how horrible it is for the donkey to carry such a heavy load. So they both decide to get off the donkey. Pass a fourth group of villagers on the way to the village, which says how stupid these two people are to have a perfectly good donkey and actually not be riding it on the way to the village. So at this point, the grandfather and the young boy are very perplexed, very confused, start crossing a bridge and decide that, well, you know what, they will carry the donkey because then that should resolve everyone's problems. On their way across this bridge, however, the donkey falls out of their hands because they're both fairly either old or too young, and falls off the river and drowns, and the donkey dies. So the moral of this story here as a leader is you will never bring everyone along for the journey. We have a myth in the public sector that we have to bring everyone along to change things. And actually, that's not how it works. You have to try to absolutely bring as many people as you can and build consensus. Those are all democratic values that do not go away. But the concept and the fallacy that you have to bring everyone along or you have to listen to everyone's opinion as you go along means that you will never change anything. Right? It will be impossible to bring everyone along. So we may as well admit it, take the hard decisions, make the hard choices, do the thing, right? Make sure you've got a multidisciplinary team and actually act, because you will never, ever, ever be able to bring everyone along, because if not, you're not changing anything. It is actually a paradox. It's actually, however you want to describe it, but it is literally impossible. So please, if you are a leader in the public sector and you're being told to try to bring everyone along, you need to know that that is an impossible task. That is another word for just don't do anything, don't rock the boat. Right? So what you want to try to do is actually make sure you bring as many people as you can. Don't listen to the critics. Actually have the conviction to do the thing. Right? Talk to the people. Take other people's opinions regardless of where they sit in the organization, and let go of everything you've ever learned, because tomorrow everything will be completely different.